Okay, hello everyone. Sorry about the rocky technical start there. As Dinesh said, it should be who changed my adapter. We had to try about 5 before we got to work. But my name is Paige Bartley, and I'm a senior analyst at Ovum, the analyst firm. I'm on our data and enterprise intelligence team, and that actually was formerly called our information management team. We didn't just change the name of that to make it more exciting. It was also to better reflect the role of information management and governance in the role of really enabling insight within the enterprise. And I think my discussion today is really going to help put that into perspective. Oh no, our slides disappeared again. Oh, they're there. Okay. So I want to step back a little bit from the discussion of compliance and regulation for a little bit, because I think a lot of people think of data lineage, data provenance, those sort of things as compliance requirements or something that you have to do reactively to kind of tick some check boxes and make the government happy. And really, I want to look at sort of enabling factors. What are the trends within the enterprise? So this data is from our ICT Enterprise Insights Survey that Ovum conducts each year. And this looks at a survey sample size of about 5,000 IT decision makers around the globe. And if you look at the IT trends that we asked different people about, you would think that exploiting business information would be the top objective for businesses, and it really isn't. It's actually down towards the bottom. Creating digital capability is really the top thing that businesses are trying to achieve, followed shortly by managing security, identity, and privacy. And what this really shows is that in order to exploit information for business advantage, there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid first in terms of information management. And that's the phase that businesses are going through right now. So what do these top 2 trends really have in common? Is that digital capability and creating digital capability depends on full control of data. The more granular your control of data, the more you can leverage that data downstream. Whatever type of data it is, if it's streaming data at rest, you have to have full control of that data throughout its life cycle, from the point of creation all the way to the time that it's at rest and being looked at historically. So business challenges in achieving digital capability, you look at things like reproducibility of analytics results. If you are supposedly analyzing the same data twice, why aren't you getting the same results? Debugging your models and algorithms. A big one for compliance and regulation and security is ensuring the correct access to your data. Do the right people have the right roles assigned? Do you have attribute-based access control based on different attributes to your data? Consistent application of data policies. This is a huge challenge when you have data silos. Different silos have different capabilities for executing policies. And if you don't have a unified governance layer within the enterprise, you're not able to consistently control those policies across the organization. Regulatory compliance, another huge one with GDPR going into effect this last May. That's a big one. And then, again, data silos are just this historical artifact that are still causing huge headaches for organizations. And in the self-service era, finding the right data at the right time is absolutely critical. So addressing these challenges requires understanding how data changes completely throughout its life cycle and having that full view. So what this means is governance and transparency of data assets is more important than it's ever been, with this convergence of regulatory requirements and then also the need to fully control data throughout its life cycle in order to be able to leverage it. And there are different factors driving this. So the first is there's more data than there's ever been before. The economics of storage have just made it cheap. It's cheap to store data and keep it forever. New types of data are constantly being created, and we're now gathering data from the edge, sensor data, biometric data even. The need to combine those data sources to get a contextual view. and more users. So with the self-service era, we're all familiar with self-service analytics, but everything is becoming self-service. We have self-service data prep. Self-service is just a new mode of consumption. The goal is to eventually make every knowledge worker a consumer of data. And as you have more users, these users have varying rights and access privileges, and you need to be able to enforce that. And as you have more users, that also means more copies of data, more data proliferation. And then finally, there's more complexity of data. So data repositories have become more distributed. The data lake is not just a monolithic Hadoop cluster on-premise anymore. There's cloud storage. There are multiple data lakes in many cases. How do you manage across those? Data resides in more locations than ever before. And then there's factors that are external to the enterprise. What's driving this from outside the enterprise that the enterprise can't control? Regulatory pressure, GDPR being the big one. There are regulations around the world that are starting to mirror GDPR that are putting requirements around management of personal data. You have to have full control of your data throughout the life cycle in order to be able to meet those requirements. For GDPR in particular, Article 30 requirements for record keeping necessitate a full knowledge of provenance of that data, the who, what, when, where, and why, what happened to that data. And then you have more competitive pressure. So everyone's familiar with this age of disruption, with data being the basis of competitive advantage. The acceleration of business processes has just exploded. It's the rate of business is faster than it's ever been before. And comprehensive understanding of your data assets is absolutely tied to your success and viability as an organization. And disruptors are emerging from industries, are crossing over. Search companies are becoming car companies. It's just coming from every angle. So I would be remiss in my duties being an analyst who covers GDPR if I didn't discuss some of the specific requirements that GDPR is covering. For any of you not familiar, that's the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, but it affects all organizations across the world. Any organization that has customers, prospects, employees, or has direct contact with anyone that has residency in Europe is affected by this. So the definition of personal data under GDPR is quite broad. It's a lot broader than what we consider PII or personally identifiable information in the US. So it's not just your credit card numbers, it's not just phone numbers, it can be anything. It can be data from the edge, it can be Fitbit data. Biometric data has special protections, as you can see in Article 9. There's a lot of restrictions around certain types of data and how they can be processed. And most importantly, one of the foundations of GDPR is this records of processing activities, the who, what, when, where, and why. And you need a deep understanding of both metadata and data lineage in order to be able to fulfill that. So I think one of the key points here is that under GDPR, there's no difference between data in motion and data at rest. Who changed what is critical. So lineage and provenance, while not directly required by GDPR, are critical to meeting its requirements. It's just sort of a prerequisite to being able to meet those. So this is a quote from my colleague, Laurent, who covers self-service analytics quite extensively. And the key point is that in order to reap the benefit of your data, data management and data governance is absolutely the foundation. So you'll never see the benefit of your data without that. And governance, by definition, requires that full visibility into data. So when you look at data in motion and data at rest, there's this unique opportunity to see the overlap of the two and to gain context. So you have data at rest, data in motion, and the overlap of those two is contextual understanding of your data. And this is where products like Hortonworks, HDP, and HDF working together give you that single platform for managing these two data sources together in a single holistic ecosystem where governance can be applied uniformly in a single place. But how do we do this? So metadata management is necessary for governance. Metadata is really one of the core aspects of governance. And having a common metadata framework allows data of different types from different sources to be managed consistently. Policies are encoded at the metadata level. That's what, if you've set a lifecycle policy on a piece of data, it's encoded at the metadata layer. So this allows for things like common search and lineage of data sets, lifecycle management, metadata exchange with metadata tools. You'll see recently there's been a huge growth in the popularity of data catalogs, for instance, that allow business users to find and discover data, analysis of data usage and access trends, and consistent application of data access rights, because again, policies about who can access what are encoded at the metadata. And it just creates a cycle of metadata analysis, metadata creation, metadata enrichment. And what you really need is an enterprise environment where all of this metadata can be managed together, regardless of where the actual data resides, whether it's in the cloud in S3 or in a Hadoop cluster on premise. You need a single view of your enterprise metadata for this to really work. So the data lake, if properly managed, even if that data lake is virtual and in multiple places, or even multiple data lakes, as we've heard discussed the last few days, if it's properly managed, it can support a common metadata framework which underpins all enterprise data. So the idea is that you have this common metadata view of data in motion, data at rest, structured data, unstructured data, really unifying these silos so that all metadata is managed together, and all metadata managed in the same environment. And common metadata management allows for this streamlined control and visibility, essentially, that results in better business outcomes. So governance needs to be equal to be effective. And what that means is if you're going to analyze all data in motion, at rest, in context with each other, you need a common, consistent application of policies. You need a common metadata framework. You need a common platform. This doesn't have to be a single physical platform like our on-premise Hadoop, but it needs to be united by a management layer. And governance and lineage for data in motion allows for audit, regulatory compliance, insight into data history and provenance, comprehensive lifecycle management, security and access controls, again, which is really important. Better data quality equals better analytics, and this is what that allows. So I think what Dinesh is going to discuss is a little bit how Hortonworks fits into this, and again, HDP and HDF are giving this common management environment for data in motion and data at rest bound by a common metadata framework. So I think Dinesh.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you. So this was a fantastic insight, right? I mean, I really wanted Paige to have this opportunity to set the stage first, because now you understand how far outreaching this particular notion of data governance in the context of streaming world is very relevant and important. I'll stress more, and just to add to what Paige said, I will not delve into the details of what or how Hortonworks fits into this. I leave it up to you for doing some learning and all that. This is not a product pitch. What I want to touch upon is, however, talk about the challenges, the data challenges that are relevant in this particular context. So we'll talk about that. And then I'll also get into some of the technology that helps with it, more from an open source context. Let's talk about some of the technologies that address some of these challenges. And then you can piece that all together using your specific core requirements and needs. So with that said, let's talk about the current landscape today, right? I mean, we talk about an architecture of multitudes here, where every single vertical that you are in has different notions of connected architectures, right? I mean, we talk about connected cars, connected factories, connected ecosystems, and whatnot. So everything has a notion of IoT into it. I mean, even if you don't call it IoT, the fact that you have data coming in from edge, data coming in from various types of streams, and then you're combining that with your data at rest. And of course, if there are people in this audience that are not clear about what is data at rest and what is data in motion, data at rest is pretty much what you've ended up in your data lake, that you are primarily going to use for historical insights and all that. And data in motion is what is constantly streaming through from inside and outside your ecosystem, either through real-time streams or through some kind of batch process, but that helps you keep a constant track of what is that data that is coming in through, how do I trap that and how do I harness the value of that. And that's where the criticality of how do I govern that data that is constantly moving comes in play, right? So that's what we need to talk about. Where I want to stress upon this particular nature of what we are dealing with in today's world is enterprises have this urge now to cater to the needs of consumers, to create new and new digital transformations on a day-to-day basis. I mean, either it be through reaching out to newer customers' channels, or extending customer experiences, or maybe for boosting operational efficiencies, right? So any one of these scenarios could be a context for lending themselves to doing something creating RFID trackers or nano devices to. I was talking with one of our customers that does jewelry insurance, and they're very particular about tracking shipments. And because jewelry moves from point A to point B, from stores to shows and all that, and they need to understand how it is or where it is in a particular given point in time, and that kind of adds up to their insurability of that particular object. So they are talking about putting nano devices like these little trackers inside each one of those shipments. So at any given point in time, instead of having a tracking ID, they can actually physically tell where exactly in the world is that jewelry. So that's a fantastic example. In that particular context, what you're dealing with is the sensors in those kinds of devices are constantly going to be sending you streams of data, and you are in a compulsive state of wanting to not only capture the data, but also understand what the data means, and also figure out how much of that data, going back to what Paige said, has PII information, personally identifiable information. It could be social security numbers or credit card numbers or whatever be it. So identifying that, separating that out, and then masking that, maybe putting some kind of encryption around it and all that. This all needs to be done in real time because this is data in motion, and you don't want to let go of it into your partner ecosystem without having that kind of governance in play. So that's the most critical thing to be understood from what's going on around us within our enterprise world, right? So with that said, what I want to introduce now is the notion of a modern data architecture. You might have heard this terminology, but what I would like to stress upon is this kind of a modern data architecture is something that enterprises today don't kind of design for it. You inherit it. You inherit it because of industry trends like IoT and cloud and all this happening around you, and then all these consumer trends or consumer demands that are happening out there that say, I want a shopping experience like Amazon's on your website. I don't want to go to your website and search. I want to be able to be recommended what other customers are buying, right? So that kind of experience is something that I want. Or AR, VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. This is something that consumers expect. If I'm going to a furniture shop, I want to be able to see how that piece of furniture would look in my home. Put on a glass or a mobile app or something like that, and put that piece of furniture visually and say, oh, this actually looks good. Or maybe I want a different shade of that particular sofa, something like that. That is next level of consumer experience. And that means you are inherently designing or taking on a modern data architecture within you. And what this means is your data now exists across multiple pockets. It's on the cloud, multiple clouds maybe. Like yesterday, it was interesting, or the day before yesterday, I was sitting in a customer advisory board session. There were 30 or 40 different customers in the room, and one of the questions that we kind of did a hand poll survey was, how many of you guys have multiple clouds? And suddenly a whole bunch of hands went up. It shouldn't be surprising, but in today's world, that's the reality of it. Enterprises today, and particularly large ones like yours, are dealing with the context of multiple clouds. You have Amazon, you have Azure, and this and that. And then, of course, you have multiple data centers, you have IoT, you have all the other types of data that you're dealing with. That gives you the notion of like, okay, now I have this big data sprawl, and I need to be able to like connect it all up. And that's where, again, going back to what Paige was saying, metadata governance and all that, making sure that you can look across the board. So if you were to look at some of the challenges, data challenges around this, what I would say is a simple example such as a customer 360 view is very challenging by itself. Like imagine, customer data does not exist in one single CRM system like what we did before, right? A decade ago, if you had said that, I would have said, yeah, I can get it from my CRM system. Today, customer data exists in all kinds of pockets, including social media. You want to understand what your customers are saying about you, about your products on social media. You want to trap that social sentiment and then put that into your support teams so they understand when they are talking to the customer saying, oh, these guys are actually not liking this set of products. They are actually complaining about our products on social media. So I need to be able to like give them the right kind of experience or support to make them feel better, right? So that's what the true customer 360 that we live in today looks like, where you're pulling data from like all these different sources, including real-time sources, right? So that's where the data challenge is, where that modern data architecture leads into. Data lakes, again, Paige touched on that too. The notion of a data lake was to like get all your data into one single entity, but for the reasons like, either mergers and acquisitions or the nature of, your business or something like that, today we have enterprises that have multiple data lakes, which is kind of weird. That kind of defeats the whole point of why we started off with data lakes, right? So that's, again, a big challenge by itself. Now, if you have multiple data lakes, how many different pockets or how many different queries do I have to run? How much assimilation do I have to do to get you that single view that you're looking for? Or too much data coming from too many different sources and in too many different formats. That is also a challenge. We saw the data sprawl that I was talking about. And then if you were to like govern that data, if you were to say, secure all HR-related information, it's not just in Workday. It's in multiple other areas as well. Now, how do I secure all that? Or if I have to say, encrypt or mask all PII information like this. And this is not in one particular data source. It's like in multiple areas. So then I have a challenge of wanting to like look at all these areas, metadata, tag that, pull that out, make sure that it can tag. And one of the talks that I was in yesterday, one of my co-speakers, he talked about this notion of Schrodinger's data, like Schrodinger's cat. It's kind of like, without even looking into the data, how will you know that it's PII? And if you look at it, it's no longer PII, right? It's like you've already broken the law of PII. So it's kind of like a little bit of a conundrum there, and wanting to like automatically understand that PII data and be able to like pull that out and then put that up for like appropriate security and governance. That's again a challenge. So the most important thing that I want you guys to like understand is, do you have the mechanism to access the right data at the right time to make the right decisions? And that's going to be the challenge in the era that we live in today, where modern data architecture, with all these different sources, with all these different challenges that exist, that's the question that needs to be answered. And if you can answer that, that means you got like a well-structured data governance program in play. So let's talk about how something like global data management, which again is a term that's been loosely thrown around, can address something like this, right? Global data management is also, again, a broader term. It can be used for many different things. But the way we like to talk about it is a common framework that helps you go across, look across all these different data, whether it's in data in motion, data at rest, on the cloud, on premises, whatnot, look at it all together and then pull a common layer that kind of gives you the management and the security and governance layer across all that. That is very critical. But it's not so simply done as well. It has its own set of challenges. The one, challenge to deal with multiple clouds, that by itself is a challenge. You want to make sure that you design an architecture that does not lock you into a specific vendor. That's also something that every enterprise wants. An architect goes through an RFP, he wants to evaluate, she wants to evaluate. It's a challenge, to figure out a technology that kind of fits the mold for what they're looking for, but also helps them adapt and grow into for a considerable future. We are here gathered at an open source conference, which is a great thing. So everybody here has the mindset of wanting to adopt open source technologies, gives you that ability to future-proof your architecture, making sure that you can grow into it, that you can adapt, that you can take on challenges and all that. That's a very good thing. So that's what this particular global data management solution should do, that it gives you that flexibility to do so. And then, most importantly, give you that common view, right? So if I were to say, get me customer data, I shouldn't worry about where the customer data exists. This framework should take care of abstracting all that out to make sure that it can gather data, customer data from across all these different sources and get you that level of elevation, right? So that abstraction is very necessary. So that's where global data management platform should help you with. So if you design it well, then it can give you the necessary launchpad for filling out and addressing some of the most common modern use cases that you're trying to address, whether it be even something like EDW optimization, or maybe like cybersecurity that you're like trying to address, because you're pulling log files from like systems and devices and applications, and you're trying to put it all together. So that could be another challenge. So that's something that you could do, or you could think of like far advanced data science, experiments that you're doing, right? And I kind of chose experiments as a word, I don't know why, but it's something that we're all dealing with, right? I mean, machine learning is something to do, but we kind of also talk about advanced analytics, where we want to take our digital transformations to the next level, where you want to be able to like serve up your customers with much more intelligent actions and data points. So that's, again, something that can be served up through this kind of a framework that, again, has the capability to look across all your data sources. So let's talk about technology. Right? So I've addressed pretty much the challenges that we have, how a global data management solution can address. What we need to then talk about is, in this notion of real-time data that is coming into you, streaming data like IoT and all that is coming into you from all these different, outside the ecosystem, at the edge, all this kind of, sources, how do you make sure that you can track the provenance? And provenance is, again, if the term is a little, confusing, I'll explain. The ability to track the data lineage of where this data came from, who sent it, when did it change, which were the touch points, what kind of changes were made, when were they made, and where is it going to. This entire traceability, this auditability of data is what we call as provenance, the origin, understanding where it came from. It's very important, particularly when you have IoT devices that are like by the tune of thousands that you've deployed, and you're getting data from all over the place. That becomes a challenge. So that's where Apache NiFi comes in play. I mean, if you're not familiar with NiFi, definitely take a look at it. It's a great tool that's been proven over and over again at a lot of our customer places, where they have leveraged NiFi to like ingest data from like streaming applications, real-time sources, either be data lakes, even batch processing, whatever be your choice of data movement. But it has inbuilt data provenance. That's what sets it apart from the rest of the pack. Like if you were saying, I have an ETL tool, or I have this, or I have that, does not have data provenance. This has built-in data provenance. And that gives you extreme level of visibility, where you can like click on each and every individual flow and understand the entire set of provenance events. This is built-in. This is fabulous. This is fantastic, where I have this ability to like not only say, okay, at that particular point in the flow, this is what happened, this is how the data looked like before, and this is what it changed into. So understanding that kind of change is very critical, again, in a real-time streaming context. Once it gets into your data lake, you have control, right? So you have the ability to do all that. But when you have multiple data sources, that also poses a challenge. So that's where I want to introduce another, a really key technology, which is Apache Atlas. So the notion of enterprise data governance is also something that you guys need to respect, right? We addressed one part of the challenge where we say, if you're getting data from the streams, if you want to provide provenance and governance, yes, NiFi can help. But once you get it in and you have like all these different multiple data sources, and you want to provide an overarching enterprise data governance to the theme of what Paige was saying about having that metadata framework and being able to tag all these different data points and all that, that's where Atlas really kicks the point home, right? So it has strong integration with NiFi. That's the good news, right? So with at least the Hortonworks set of technologies that we have, it has integration with NiFi that gives you the capability to take the view of data provenance and governance all the way from the edge into your enterprise. So complete traceability is what you get when you combine these two tools together. That's alliteration. integration with Ranger, which also gives you the ability to do security. Again, that is very much needed when you talk about provenance and you say, these are PII information, I want security, I want only these set of people to access that and all that. That brings in the notion of security, and the integration with Ranger also gives you that. If you have not already looked at Datastored Studio, if you have not already heard the buzz about it, check it out. Again, I don't want to make it a product pitch. Check out Hortonworks Datastored Studio. That under the hood is pretty much Atlas and Ranger, but gives you that capability of wanting to do full enterprise level data governance. All right. So with that, I want to wrap it up. Any questions? Paige and I are here. Paige, you want to come up? So if there are any questions for Paige, she can answer that as well. Then let us know. And if you guys liked it, let us know that as well. Yes, please.
Yeah, as far as governance with Apache Atlas, we're 12, NiFi, what about other tools for the rest of the BI or stack or analytics?
Rest of the tools, I'm sorry, if you could use the mic.
Tools that you would use for analytics or ETL or whatever. Does it work with SigSort or does it work with high concentration?
Sure. I mean, there are definitely a lot of partner technologies that we integrate with as well. So I cannot probably give you the entire lay of the land here right now. But if you're interested, we can definitely connect you up with the right technology folks that can tell you, how it maps out with the rest of the other partner solutions that we have. And we do have, integrations with SingSort and other such, partner solutions too. But I think what I would also say is understanding where your data flows in and where it ends up. Because when you're talking about analytics, you're not changing data at that point. You're more like, I've gotten all this data, now I want to provide that visualization layer, or I want to understand, where this data has to go through and all that. So you are at the point where if the data has already gone through several levels of transformations and all that. So the provenance and governance comes in much up front, up to that point. The governance that starts off from the point of analytics is more about, do the right people that have the right access are the ones that are accessing this particular visualization is where that level of governance comes in. So I would say, let's talk, offline and connect you up with the right folks to make sure that you get that answer.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that a lot of analytics tools, a lot of applications have their own settings for role-based access controls, for security settings, and you need to make sure that those are not overlapping or contradicting the governance settings that you have in your underlying platform. So you really want to work from the ground up rather than putting in your security and your governance at the application layer.
Cool. Any other questions? All right. Well, you've been a fantastic crowd. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming over. Thanks.